postponed until the 13th is now in order, and so please stand to the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Oswald?
Yes.
Battle?
Yes.
Durbin?
Yes.
Fratelli?
Here.
Keaton?
Yes.
Ronnie? Yes. Whistler? Yes.
First thing on the agenda is approval of the minutes of March 8th and the 22nd. So, can I have a motion to approve the work session for March 8th?
I so move.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Battle? Yes. Fratelli?
Yes.
Durbin?
Yes.
Keaton?
Yes.
Ronnie? Yes. Whistler?
Yes. Motion to approve the business meeting on the 8th. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Okay. Any discussion? Roll call?
Battle? Yes. Fratelli?
Yes.
Durbin?
Yes.
Keaton?
Yes.
Ronnie? Yes. Whistler? Yes.
Now we'll need a motion to approve the minutes for the work session on March 22nd. May I have a motion?
I so move.
Second. Any discussion? Roll call?
Battle? Yes. Fratelli?
Yes.
Durbin?
Yes.
Keaton?
Yes.
Ronnie?
Yes.
Whistler? Yes.
Next up is the warrants payable. May I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve paying claims for $691,792.64.
Second.
Any discussion?
I think I would just point out that there's a number of pool payments, and that's why it's this particular line item. So this month, everything else looks pretty normal. Yeah,
Yeah, it's on with the cranes over there by the pool.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting.
looking pretty good.
Any further discussion? Roll call?
Battle?
Yes.
Fratelli?
Yes.
Durbin?
Yes.
Keaton?
Yes.
Ronnie?
Yes.
Whistler? Yes.
Thank you. Officer reports. Do we have, I know, I hate to ask Public Works because we all know what's been going on out there.
Lots of snow removal.
You don't have to comment, but if you'd like to, you're
I'll
welcome.
just say we did that'll clear up, but tomorrow we will be doing widening where possible, but we're not gonna get carried because of the ground is thawed out now, so we're not gonna get carried away about pushing it over because it tears up much, but we're gonna try and clear as much as we can doing widening tomorrow and go from there. We have more coming, so I hope you all enjoyed your spring.
Thank you, Jim. And if any council people have any reports they'd like to make from the departments they represent, we can hit them as we see them. So, no, I think everybody's just moving forward as we do. So, next thing up is the mayor's comments. So, this is the first meeting with our new format of the agenda. Please bear with us as we continue to work to improve our format. The idea is to get the most out of our time. The event application is still a work in progress. And the budget, we're still planning on a presentation. Jen, did you have anything you wanted to add about that?
Yes, so Lonnie and I chatted, and we're gonna have a short presentation for the public at the next city council meeting. And that will go over some of the basics of the budget process and timeline and when the community has an opportunity to provide input. And it'll also include short presentations by any department head that would like to speak on what their requests involved this year, and just overall questions, or overall here to answer questions from the public as we head into May, which is when the community will see the draft budget for 2022-2023. So this is a preemptive kind of conversation, just outlining the process for everybody and answering some basic questions and having the department heads here. So expect that at the next council meeting, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Mm-hmm.
This is the time now for public comments. We're gonna talk about some good issues here, and we're gonna have plenty of time to do that. But if you want to talk about anything right now, please do. You're welcome to come up to the podium, state your name and address, and you can speak for 3 minutes and be polite.
Good evening, thank you for this time. My name is Maria Horman. I have a home on South Hagen. I am here with no gain except to voice my convictions. I have no interest monetarily in anything I say. I am a nurse in the intensive care unit at Billings Clinic. I've been there for 30 years. I have seen the very bad side of marijuana use. I think there is a very limited role for medical marijuana use. I've never said when my patients have come in very ill, I wish they would have done more. It's always, I wish they would have done less. So I'm encouraging the board to revise their 2016 limit of footage for the marijuana dispensaries from 250 feet to 500 feet, which would make it compliant with state law.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more public comment? And again, we'll have another opportunity for public comment later on when we talk about each issue.
I am Daniel Ortman. I live at 219 South Hagen. And thank you for this time. I have two concerns regarding the lighting ordinance. The associated with the dark sky initiative. I find after almost 30 years of being around Redwatch that we seem to be a fairly dark town already. We have a lot of dark streets. If anything, we lack proper lighting in a lot of our areas here in Redwatch. So I hate to think we're going to go pitch black in this town. It's a scary place to walk in after dark. Our sidewalks are very poor condition. We find ourselves walking in the middle of the road most of the time here in town, and it's hard enough dodging cars, let alone having really, really dark streets. So I'm just concerned about how dark are we going to go in Redwatch, because I feel like we're already a pretty dark place on the map at the base of Fairview. So, and how are we going to pay for all this? If there's money involved here with upgrades or downgrades or whatever we're going to do here, very concerned. Anything that costs money right now seems like why does it go that direction? We don't really have any money. But and how do we enforce this and all that? So those are my concerns with this new idea. My other one is regarding relaxing our zoning for new construction. What I read in there is basically opening up Pandora's box for maybe really cheap construction and unattractive construction. So I'm concerned when we loosen up the zoning for building, very concerned that doesn't come into unattractive construction and AKA metal pole barn type inexpensive construction of that type. When you remove the historical character from the verbiage of zoning, then you're opening up Pandora's box for, we don't have to concern ourselves with, does it blend in with our historical 130-year-old landscapes that we have here? Are we going to, build just somewhat ugly buildings with no oversight to how they blend in with our Western heritage and our 130-year-old houses here in the neighborhood? So that's my concern for relaxing the building codes. And I realize there's something involved there regarding housing, and I appreciate that. But I hope you guys have a lot of oversight for what you're going to allow to be developed in the future when we take away that historical character phrase. In some communities, it's called architectural committees. There's a lot of different verbiage for that sort of thing. What kind of things you allow to be built that's going to be appropriate for the neighborhood. Those are my concerns. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, thank you. Any more public comment?
I'm Becky Gray, and I am for the dark skies because I'd like to look out at night, be able to see the stars and what's going on. And I think it'll be a big tourist motivator for people with families to come through Redwatch and realize that they can camp and see the sky, starlight, that they usually can't see if they're coming from back east. So, I think it will be a plus for the community.
Thank you. Any more public comments? Yes.
Hi, I'm Karen Walmsley, 24 Spruce Lane, and I want to speak in terms of the lighting ordinance. I think it's really important that we think for the future, and the more that we build up this community, hopefully it'll be in a sustainable way. And to be thinking about lighting, when we're talking about lighting, we're not talking about removing lighting. There are many things that can be done to put caps over lighting and to direct the light downward. So I hope that people don't have a fear that we are going to be, proposing to rip out lights everywhere. But I think we need to be careful. The neighborhood that I live in, there are no street lights out there, and I am pleased about that. I like to sit outside at night and look at the stars and appreciate nature, and so I would hate for that part of Redwatch to be ruined. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments? Well, thank you for each of them. Old business. First thing up is the use of city-owned land permit for the farmer's market. Did anyone have any concerns remaining from the last meeting where we already discussed it? All right.
I think we've had all the letters in, right? And the fee's been paid, the insurance secured for liability. I don't see any. Everybody realized from their last announcement it was going to move from Friday afternoons to Saturdays from 9 to noon. I haven't heard anything other than the 2 letters of support that I received on council in favor of the market on Saturday.
Thank you.
And I'll just mention, because I don't think I did last time, that I have to abstain from this vote because I'm on the board of the farmer's market.
Thank you. Yep. Maybe we have a motion?
I move to approve the permit for the use of city-owned land for the farmer's market.
I'll second it.
Any further comment from the table? Any further comment from the floor? No comment from the online audience? All right, then, roll call?
Battles? Abstain. Curtelli?
Yes.
Durbin?
Yes.
Yes.
Ronnie? Yes. Yes.
Thank you. All right. Next up is on old business is an attempt to finish up with the 2022 zoning regulations, including marijuana and lighting. We have 12 left, in addition to the zoning map changes. I know that in matters like these, one size does not fit all. It is likely that all of us would do it differently, but our task is to determine if the changes are overall proper and suitable for our community, and edit the things we have an overall consensus on. Like our present agenda format, zoning documents are by their very nature typically a work in progress, which is why we're required to review them every 5 years. If a situation arises, that means we have to make changes in the future, we can do that. I would expect changes. But the document is in anticipation of what we need now or will need in the future, so we need to do our best to answer those questions. The thing that's come up first is some suggested changes in our marijuana zoning. As you all might know, we're not debating whether or not to legalize it because the voters in Redwatch precincts approved it already. We're trying to establish appropriate and fair zoning as we do for other businesses. Courtney, did you want to provide an introduction to the marijuana ordinance changes?
Yeah, so I tried to look back because a lot of the language in the marijuana section is left over from when it was medical marijuana. So the 300 feet came from that. And so with the new state laws that are, some of them are changing,
each month. So we wanted to make sure that what we have is in compliance with what the state wants. So I did reach out to the Department of Revenue with two main questions. One being the foot, the 500 feet. So we can make stricter regulations, but we cannot have looser regulations. So the 500 feet is the minimum that we can do. The other question was, are we allowed to, since the county residents voted it, are we allowed to prohibit it? And they said yes, but you have to do an election. So in the future, if there's a type of marijuana business that we want to prohibit, we can take it to a vote and prohibit it. But since it was voted by the majority of residents in Carbon County, we have to allow it unless we do an election.
Thank you. Teresa, did you want to, Teresa, you've worked on this a lot.
Yeah, well, not a lot, but I had a discussion with a couple different people in the community, and I understand there's a desire to have marijuana dispensaries in the downtown business district. I looked at the older ordinance, and I know that there are some things that we could do that could see us by. And they may not be perfect, like you said, we're going through things and evolving, changing. It's not going to suit everybody. But considering what Courtney found out, that we must allow it, the number one question I have now is, if we must allow marijuana businesses, are we doing anything incorrectly by saying that we're allowing marijuana dispensaries only?
So the Montana, and this could be a question for Denison, but the Montana Code of Annotated lists the types of businesses, medical dispensaries that are, or businesses that are allowed. And I think for us to prohibit any of those, we need to have an election to prohibit them, but I'm not.
So by, what I'm trying to get at is by not stating that they're allowed as either principal or conditional, does that send a message that we are not? Because if they're not listed as conditional or somewhere in our allowed uses, they are not allowed, right? So do we need to name the businesses? Today we have listed just marijuana dispensary. And that's because this is a new one by me.
Maybe we can find out what the answers to that are, and then if we do need to enact further ordinances requiring other uses, we can come back and do that, like we would do with other changes.
Right. And so, where we left off the last time, I said it before, I'll say it again. We didn't go into that discussion, but I'll just recap what I mentioned last time was that if we allowed marijuana dispensaries as conditional, which is what is stated in the regulations that we have in front of us, and we adjust it to 500 feet, they are listed today as conditional in C4 only. Redwatch being so short, I wondered if it made sense to say that we would also allow them in the C3 North, C3 South, also as conditional. Just to say conditional, conditional, conditional. That way we have people coming to the planning board and making sure that they understand, you know, what is allowed, what the standards are, and things like that. There would be some, you know, it wouldn't be just somebody setting up shop and having one adjacent to the other and not having any oversight at all. So I thought that could be a good fix and a solution to, you know, the light use that we have listed in our zoning regulation today.
Yeah, and the change from 300 around to 500 on the same street actually opens up more properties in the downtown business.
C4.
In the C4. If you want to open it up as conditional in the community entrances, then I think we should discuss possibly limiting the number of licenses allowed in the city limits, and setting a cap at the number of licenses that we will allow.
Maybe we could, I mean, I think there's like 4 or 5 changes we could go through each one, and we'll get some comments from the audience so that everybody understands exactly what we're talking about here.
Right.
So,
And I think on top, I think the supra, point to make here is that, this reads that we're following both federal and state rules and regulations. I think we should change it to say that we're following state regulations. And that would mean also that there's a change to a earlier section within the zoning document 4.1.81, where we have to talk about how the federal and state laws, which one's stricter, which ones are we following. But if we accept the state rules over federal, we have to make that exception and that statement in that section of our zoning document, conflicting with state or federal regulations. Did you want me to read that?
Yes.
Yeah, so basically what we were saying was provisions of this ordinance are inconsistent with provisions of state or federal law or regulations. The provisions that impose the greater restriction are more stringent controls shall apply, and then to the extent permitted by law, accepting any entity or operation that is regulated and controlled under the Montana Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. So just adding that last part of the sentence lets everybody know that our zoning document, our regulations are all under those controls with the exception of marijuana by the state. That's that one.
So what we're going to discuss right now is that change to make it state laws unless there's federal laws, but as far as the legality, we're going to go by the state laws as is permitted under Montana law. The second thing is we're going to consider if we should have conditional use permits in the commercial districts or in the entrances. That would mean they need to be approved by the planning board. And then it would be lawful in the C4 zoned area. Is it currently lawful in the C4 area?
Only conditional.
Okay. So those are the issues, and we'll go around the table. And I assume you've already said what you want to.
Well, I'll just read back then, and I'll finish there. My idea, when I first saw that this was very outdated and that there were a lot of questions among the community about it, my initial idea was that we match this to what we do today for alcohol. We have C4 as a principal use for the alcohol sales. We have a liquor store right here in town, that we would move the marijuana dispensary as a C4 principal as the liquor store is allowed, but then put only conditional on C3 south and north, where today alcohol, a variety of uses and consumption are allowed today. So just basically matching what is done for alcohol, and it actually is a stricter set of regulations even at that, because there is no consumption allowed in marijuana dispensaries, no consumption. So it's still tighter than alcohol.
Thank you. Kelly, did you have anything you'd like to?
I don't have anything to add, really. I think that's, I'm on the same page as Teresa on that I think it's wise to follow along with alcohol regulations in the state. So I agree with everything Teresa said.
Jen?
I'm fine with changing it to follow state regulations. And it makes sense to me to agree with matching the dispensary zoning to alcohol zoning. I'm curious, does a request for an alcohol facility have to go through planning anyway, even if it's principal, just because it's alcohol, or it doesn't?
Sorry, someone is on the plane.
If it's an allowed use, principal use, then they can just do it and then it's like if they're building a brand new structure, then they have to come to planning board typically if it's over a certain size, but conditional is they have to come to planning board.
Okay. It makes sense to me to have it match dispensary zoning to alcohol zoning.
Thank you. Jody?
I guess I have a few concerns. Number one, I would personally like to send this back to planning board and have them set these zoning guidelines that we have here and let them have, go through it and make it the way that they feel it should be as a planning board, minus the federal. And then bring that back to us to vote. That would be my preference. Just because I feel that that's their expertise and that's what they're for. So that's my first thing. My second thing is that I do have concerns about the historic business district downtown. And I guess I really, which is another reason why I guess I kind of like the planning board to take a look at it to actually decide where these would be best suited for our town to be in. I realize that the voters did vote to legalize it, but I think I'm hearing from a lot of people in their mind's eye, they voted to legalize it because they are more, your life, your home, whatever you want to do. But when it comes right down to it, I'm hearing a lot of people not really want it to be sold right on Main Street in Redwatch. They feel that it will detract from our historic downtown vibe we have going on. But there again, to me, that's where I think the planning board comes into play, and they can maybe come up with some ways to limit that impact that people are concerned about. And also, I think it should stay conditional wherever we have it. And I agree with Courtney, and just like a liquor license, we can only have so many in town. So if you're going to follow that same thing, I think you should limit the number of dispensaries we have in town. Whether it's like 1 per 1,000 people or 1 per 500, but some type of guideline needs to be put in place. I mean, the county really had a problem with the number that were popping up everywhere. And I feel we need to take our time, come up with some great guidelines. So we do it right the first time, so we're not playing catch up down the road, is kind of what I feel. And I know we haven't talked about it yet, but I know that we can charge the resort tax, but do we want to put it on the ballot in November to charge the local option tax as well? And utilize that money, designate that money for something, whether it's a resource officer in the schools or to help fund a code enforcement officer. There's so many different things we could utilize that money for that I'd like to really. So I guess my thing is I just would like to take our time and do it right. Thank you. Pete.
The communications I have had from constituents is overwhelmingly in favor of the sale in town. I've only had one communication that was partially opposed. I think I received 10 enthusiastic endorsements from residents of the city or in the county close by. I have to agree that I would prefer to send this back to the planning board. I feel that if we begin to try to stitch together a patchwork of changes at this level, we might miss something because we haven't been in it from day one, where they have. So I would like to see it go back to them, regardless of how long it took. And then my last point is I think we should be very careful on how we restrict any legal commerce, regardless of the perhaps emotional tie opposed to pot. If we restrict legal commerce, we're setting ourselves up for liability. And I think we need to take this very slowly and do it correctly the first.
Terry.
Well,
marijuana that we areas, but I appreciate the work Teresa's done, and I think following state code would work for me. So I support what the work Teresa's done in my house.
Thank you. Are there any comments on the floor? Yes.
I was concerned about the idea of making it a conditional use. When we get something on the planning board that's a conditional use, we have the option to say no. So it is a conditional use. So if we're going to say that we can't turn them down as long as we zoned it in a certain area, then we can't. Calling it a conditional use is kind of a sticky wicket. We turn and as a planning board, I think that it would be wise if we did go through it detail to detail. I'm not really fond of the idea of our community entrances. Anybody coming into Redwatch is coming into an old west town, and having a marijuana dispensary in an old west town kind of reminds me of Colorado, and I've heard a lot of negatives about that. So I'd like to keep our complete community entrance in downtown pristine. Does it have to be on Main Street? No, it doesn't. Does it have to be in our community entrance? No. There's lots of commercial zoning that isn't on Broadway. So I personally would prefer that we really look at that zoning map and find a place to put them that isn't on Broadway or our community entrances. And I love the idea of restricting the number.
We'll get to that. Any more comments? Al?
I kind of agree with Sandy for sure on the conditional use. If we put some criteria in our zoning and the individual comes in and meets our criteria, it's very difficult to turn them down on a conditional use. So I'm with her on that. I would like to have the input from the entire planning board and some legal input as well. And I also want to question the 500 feet. You mentioned that would allow more than the 300 feet, and I'd like to check that out because that doesn't make sense to me.
We'll get to that part,
Okay.
but right now, I just want
But I
to.
mean, our planning board could look at that.
Yeah, okay. Michael?
Michael Keys, 408 South McGillen. I can completely understand that we still have stigma with this industry, and I can absolutely appreciate those who have a concern. Point out is that the state of Montana is incredibly our industry is very tight as to what we can do. So, for instance, our signage, we are not allowed to have neon signs with pot leaves. We're not allowed to have signs with pot leaves. We're not allowed to have signs saying marijuana, cannabis, or pot. We are not allowed to have anything on our business that you, as a tourist, as you drive into Redwatch and wander around Redwatch, you go, whoa, that's a pot shop. We can't have it. We can have our logo of our business name, and that is all we are allowed to have. So if you have a dispensary or 2 or 3, it is not like some places like Oregon, Colorado we've traveled through, where you're like, man, they sell cannabis there. My business, for instance, says Sweetgrass. That could refer to a county. That could refer to anything. It simply says Sweetgrass on it. So if you are driving into town, you do not look over and look at Sweetgrass and go, that's a cannabis dispensary. No, you have really no clue what it is. People can go online and search dispensary near me, and the dispensaries in the area will pop up when they search for them. It is not in your face. It is not out there. And I would say, you as a city, when you develop your zoning regulations for cannabis shops, put that wording in there. So 2 years from now, when the state starts laxing up their rules a little bit, it doesn't matter at that point because you as a city still have those rules in place. You as a city can also say 300 feet if you want. The city of Bridger just passed their zoning laws at 300 feet. However, the state trumps that. The state is 500 feet. So my shop that I'm opening in Bridger still has to be 500 feet. But what the city of Bridger did was they knowingly knew that down the road it could change. They don't have to change anything at that point. They have their rule at 300 feet if it ever is allowed by the state. So again, make your rules how you see fit. But ultimately, I'm asking you to roll along with what the state has done. It's also easier for you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. But think about what you might want to see as the state changes things in the future. But again, you are not going to know we're a cannabis dispensary unless you know we're a cannabis dispensary.
Thank you. Are there any more comments on the floor? Yes.
I'm James McGregor. We own Bear Tooth Medicinal. We're the dispensary in town along with we've been in town for a long time, doing this since 2014. I appreciate your comments on trying to do this right the first time. The one thing that's made it incredibly hard for us to do business has been the constant changing, the constant things that weren't covered up front, such as what just happened in Roberts. So much of that could have been established in legislation, orders, locally, could have commented on it at the same time. It just never happened. So I appreciate the fact that we're here today talking about this. I thank you for your time, city council members, all of you doing a fantastic job of this. I just look forward to where this is going, and I want to do this with complete transparency with everybody. This is something that Mike and I are trying to do behind the shadows and sneak around and do this behind your back. We want this to be open, and we want to make the community proud of what we have to bring to you.
Thank you. Any more comments on the floor? Yes, Mike.
I'd like to bring one more comment up. The local tax option, be careful with that, please. You already can take 4% resort tax, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Recreational cannabis right now is taxed at 20% by the state. You throw the 4% on top, okay. If we have a county vote down the road that throws 3% for their local option, we're at 27%. You start getting to that 30%, you're starting to push people back to street weed. Street weed, so I'm just, okay.
We'll have a conversation about that at some point, but we're not talking about it tonight. Are there any more comments on the floor? Yes.
The state law, the Department of Revenue makes it clear if a cannabis shop is in violation of 500 feet, they cannot be licensed in the state of Montana. Saw that on my research just recently here.
Thank you.
So we have to be very careful, I guess.
And thank you. We do have our city attorney online, and he's looked into a lot of the legalities. So if we have questions for him, he's available. Are there any comments online about this particular part of the issue? In the online world? Okay. All right, then, at the table, how many do we have that would like to move forward and are content with the change as discussed?
Well, I'm confused. There's two things here. I think we're probably all ready to say yes to follow state regs versus federal. But then the second question is, do we put it back to the planning board to come up with the zoning?
First, we will cover the changing it from federal to state rule.
Perfect.
So, do we have an agreement at the table?
Yes.
Is there anyone who disagrees? Okay, so that part of it we're okay with. The second thing would be allowing a conditional use in the C3N and C3S. Do we have a consensus at the table, or does the majority of the table feel we can move that through?
I just want to make a comment about a comment that was made, and it's related to that. The comment that pushing this out into other commercial areas and avoiding C4 and Main Street pushes it further into residential or mixed residential areas, which I think would be more problematic. So I am concerned about that, and saying that, it can go somewhere else and not the C4 district. That's all I wanted to say about that.
Do we need to have further discussion on that point, or would you like to have an informal vote on moving it forward or not? Does anyone have any more comments?
I'm not in favor of moving this forward. I think it needs to go back to the planning board.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're rushing to judgment here, and we're going to set ourselves up for not only setbacks, but revisions and possible lawsuits.
Mm-hmm. Well,
That's my opinion.
And as you know, they have had their way with this part of the zoning document. So I'm sure everybody has their thoughts, and we we'll take those into consideration. Oh, Terry, or Courtney. Courtney, what do you?
I just wanted to, I definitely think that the planning board can revisit this, but I think it's the safest because the state law is changing, and so I don't want to put anything in or have the planning board put anything in that changes the next month. So I think we're okay with following what the state law says right now. We can kind of play with the commercial districts, but we don't know either way of how it's going to be. So I also don't want us to create language that's going to cause problems for us because this is such a new thing for the town. So I think it's definitely something that when the planning board has time to be able to have multiple meetings on it, to have the public give input, and it's been in Montana a little longer, the state law is a little bit firmer, then we can create something that's more localized. I think so to protect us from, having to go back is having maybe a limitation, whether it's based on per capita, but otherwise, I don't want to hold up our zoning too long, because I think that the medical or the marijuana section should take at least a couple of months of discussion and making amendments to it.
And that goes along with, this is a living document. We can come back and we can change things. It's going to change. Yes.
One thing you might note is our 7-member board, we have 2 members on it now that worked on it before when we actually went into the marijuana discussion, which was probably a year ago. So since then, it's become legal. And so a lot of changes has happened since the planning board actually discussed this in detail. So as a member of the planning board, I think it would be wise to let the planning board duke it out and figure out which way. I mean, there's, everything's changed, as Michael said, everything's changed. And we need to look at it and spend some time, especially on exactly where would be a good spot for it. Just because it's not in the C4 or C3 north and south doesn't mean that there aren't 2 other commercial districts that might be, both for residential and commercial. But the point is that those types of things, we could make those conditional use for location where the neighbors are notified. When we do a conditional use, we notify the neighbors. And so that would, at least we'd have some local input in that area. But there's a lot of things that the planning board needs to look at again.
And I think from my perspective in the use of city time, I think this document was something that was to have been reviewed like in December. And we've had 6 weeks to review the language that we're talking about this evening. We're not saying that it can't be re-looked at, but I think I think we need to move past talk. And that's just my opinion, not with any authority of anything yet.
Just think of, we have one state liquor store here in town, am I correct? I believe we do. Do we need more than one pot dispensary? Can you guys handle the community?
Sir, excuse me.
I'm sorry.
We are going to get to that.
Okay.
But that's not what we're.
Just curious.
We're just focusing on this one issue of it being zoned conditional in the C3N and C3S, and just zoned appropriate for C4. And if we can, if the majority of council would like to move that forward, then we'll go on and we'll bring the whole discussion back so that we can, when the public hearing is held, then we'll have a consensus from council of if the majority approves or not. So, yes.
Can we hear from Dennison about the comment about if there's a conditional use permit and how the planning board's inability to say no to something because it has to be allowed. Can we hear from Dennison on that?
Dennison? Dennison?
Oh, he's trying to find his
Yep. There he is.
Hello? Dennison, I'm not.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
There
Did
you
you
are.
hear the question?
I did.
Okay, and
Mayor, members of the City Council, the conditional use permit allows the city to decide whether, or the planning board in this case, to decide whether they want to approve it or not based on additional functions. So it does give a planning board additional discretion. Obviously, any action taken cannot be arbitrary, cannot be capricious, cannot be without a reason. So it does give the planning board more discretion on whether they want to approve a use or not, but any decision still has to be based upon facts, data, and reason, and especially any denial of any type of application would definitely still need to be based upon a specific reason.
thank you, Dennison. Does that answer your question?
I am still kind of hung up on the first statement that Courtney made about, so these are zoning regulations today, and we are not providing for other marijuana businesses other than marijuana dispensary. Do we have to list marijuana businesses in this section? Is it, maybe that's a Dennison question?
That's how the marijuana business categories that must be approved is what Montana Code kind of lays it out, and then they have a whole list of the types of businesses categories.
So we don't need to,
dispensary being one of them.
we would need to update that.
And yes, the planning board can deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
So does anyone have any more questions for Dennison? Yes?
Oh, not them.
Okay. What was your question?
I just wanted to ask the planning board, if we sent this document back to the planning board, realistically, how many weeks would it take to get it back with the updated zoning?
Well, we have an agenda that's been sent out to the public that was tonight. That meeting has been postponed to the 27th. I don't know if we have to republish that agenda or do we have to wait?
Well, we have a conditional use permit for subdivision review on the 27th, so that pretty much takes up our entire.
So we couldn't do it on the 27th?
No, that was why this zoning regulations took so long, because we've seen an increase in development and an increase in permits to review. So, I mean, I could say that maybe the next week, but I might get an application that I have to schedule for that first meeting in May, which is after city council. So it's at least a month before we even be able to.
So that sounds like, Ms. Mayor, that'll push us into May, which delays it even farther. I can't speak for the entire board, but as chairman, I think if you go to the state regulation and you put it in C4 and then let the chips fall where they may, I think we'll be okay.
That's how this all started, was the Band-Aid approach, knowing that, I'm going to bring it up right now, the 90-10 rule, what's in the planning board has worked very hard on bringing forward all those changes that are more focused on improving infill and incentives and, some of the development that we need for housing. It's important that we get that out because we are in a period of rapid growth. There's a lot of developers coming in. We need to have an updated zoning regulation document. The intent of this was not to hold up the current zoning regulations from moving forward, but to put a Band-Aid on it, something that we could get by with. And I know we have new information tonight, but I would like to see if we can, you're probably not going to like it, but I would like to say that we could get this worked out. There's a lot here that needs to be opened up and reworded with the new information we have, but still put in a Band-Aid, if you will, that helps us to get, without going back to the planning board, a good solution for marijuana businesses in our zoning regulations until they can circle back and do a more robust read through and work on it.
So I want to get did you have one more?
I would be concerned about Band-Aids because once something is in for that exact moment, then it's grandfathered in. So I would go with a more strict area until the Band-Aid comes off and we dig into it.
Well,
The
we're
Band-Aid could be strict, I'm
Well,
sorry.
you know what,
They're at C4.
We're gonna do a Band-Aid. If the Band-Aid doesn't work, we're gonna do the tourniquet. We're gonna do the best we can, and we're gonna do it with the most agreement. But right now, I would like to ask if we have the majority of the table in favor of conditional use in C3N and C3S with approved use in C4. And so I would like to know, is there dissent and how many are dissenters?
I am a dissenter.
Thank you.
I am, because I want the planning board to take it back.
Okay,
I'm in favor
okay.
for this to get us through, yes.
So I will note 2 dissenters, which is good because we need to hear from everybody and we're not all going to agree. So we'll move to one more small thing, which is a big thing, and that would be how many. Courtney, do you feel like we should put a cap on how many, and how many do you think would be appropriate?
So, I do believe that we should put a cap, especially if we want to start strict or, more restricted. And then we can always loosen that up when we revisit the zoning, revisit the medical marijuana as an amendment in 6 months, a year. Whereas the number, that can be up to you guys. I think 2 is a good number, 3, maybe no more than 3, especially if we're expanding it into the commercial community entrance south and community entrance north. That would put 1 per, in theory, 1 per zoning district, but it's up to you guys. I think Bridger limited it to 1, 2, and I think Billings limited theirs and their downtown to 4.
And like we did before, we will go around the table, and then we'll hit the floor, and then we'll be online. So, Teresa, would you like to begin, or would you like me to begin on the other end?
My initial thought is 2 would be fine, and especially, and then if you wanted to consider south and north entrances, I would say you could probably do even just 1 downtown and then say 3 total if they're in the others, but I don't know how to word all that.
That's okay. Kelly?
I believe that if we're gonna kind of shore everything up with state law, for alcohol licenses, they limit it as per capita. So right now for state law on liquor stores, it's 1 per 1,000 people. And so I think that, so 2 for me is enough, and I wouldn't be in favor of anything more than 3.
Thank you. Jen?
The 1 per 1,000, again, matching alcohol zoning makes sense to me, but I also want to just say out loud that I get that we're trying to do a Band-Aid, and the idea is that this will go back to the planning board for a more robust assessment, and I just want to voice that I'm uncomfortable with us doing this, and I get why we're doing it, but I would say I'd like to hear council direct the planning board to take this back and immediately address it as soon as feasibly possible, because I don't think it's a good, that's why we have the planning board, so we don't have to sit up here and go, oh, 2, I don't know, right? So,
if we could stick to this.
No, but that's what I'm saying is 1 per 1,000 sounds good to me from the perspective of matching alcohol zoning with the goal of sending it back to the planning board for a more robust assessment.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think 1 per 1,000 of full-time residents in the city limits, and if we grow to 3, then we could have 3.
We can always add more.
Always have more people.
I'm a firm believer of free market enterprise, supply and demand. I don't think there should be any restrictions and arbitrarily pick out a number. I feel that's restricting commerce.
Thank you, Pete. Terry?
I think it should mirror whatever the state laws are for liquor stores.
Thank you. Comments from the floor? Michael?
I'm not sure how you would come about the restriction of how many you would allow, but I'd like to throw a couple scenarios out there. If you have 7 dispensaries, or if you have 2 dispensaries, you're not serving more cannabis. You're serving the same amount. It's divvied up between the ones that are there. Today I walked through 4 bars in town. 1 bar had 6 people, 1 bar had 0 people, 1 bar had a dozen, 1 bar had 2 dozen. It's a similar thing. And I would say that we have to think about too, Redwatch is a tourist town, so it's not just our residents that we're serving. As we all know, in the summertime, our bars are packed, all of them, everything is packed. A dispensary is not going to be much different. And I'll be totally honest with you, when the Renaissance Fair comes to Redwatch, I'm seriously concerned about how many people I can actually serve safely and efficiently. What are we expecting, 5,000 people for a Renaissance Fair? 8. I'm going to go out on a limb and say if even a quarter of them are cannabis consumers, 1 store, 2 stores can't serve them. Harley weekend, 1 store, 2 stores can't serve them. Any more than 2 bars could serve all of those people in downtown. So again, I would agree with Pete on this. You need to allow free market to happen. What's going to happen, and it's already happening in the county, you've got people wanting to set up shop. But some of them are failing simply because they aren't good business people, or simply because they don't have a good product. So if you want to put a limit on it, great, but I would ask you to think more about the free market scenario on that.
Thank you. Any more comments from the floor? Yes.
Yeah, I think proximity is going to be an issue more than anything else with the residents. I don't think anybody wants to see 3 dispensaries on every block anywhere in town. I like the comments about spreading this out. I don't want to be right next door to Mike. I don't think Mike wants to be right next door to myself. You have 3 zones. I understand the opposition, maybe the entrance zones being an issue, the appearance, but I think Mike covered that well with our signage. We are pretty easy to look at. We're not confrontational. So I think 2 to 3 in city limits is appropriate. I agree with Mike that I think on those busy weekends, we're going to be hard pressed to keep up with the demand of people walking through the door. So that should be a consideration.
Thank you. Any more comments on the floor? Yes.
I just wonder, doesn't state law limit how close they can be to each other? So how many feet are there?
So each block is 300, so.
Oh, okay.
Any more comments on the floor? Any comments online? Any comments online? All right. I have heard that this would be a good issue if the planning board wanted to look at it. And I've also heard that the number 2 seems like the magic number unless we have no number. But we could start with 2, and then if the planning and zoning board wants to look at it again, we can always have more. We can't have fewer, but it seems like people want more than 1, if only for the idea of capitalism and competition and volume and demand. So I would like to know if the table is in favor, or actually I would like to know how many people are not in favor of a number of 2 dispensaries.
I am not in favor of that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Not in favor. Thank you. So we can move that forward. And again, this would be something that can be reviewed. Okay. Another item is the state has specific rules about the distances and where they can be. And I'll read that to you. This is straight out of Montana Code, annotated, and it's licensing. Oftentimes, the city has the ability to make our own laws if we want to go above and beyond what the state has. But for licensing, we need to stick to the state licensing laws because it's the state who licenses dispensaries. So the city, you know, we can let them go anywhere they want, but if the state won't give them a license, it doesn't really matter. So the state license board says that the department shall consider if the dispensary is within 500 feet of and on the same street as a building used exclusively as a church, synagogue, or other place of worship, or as a school or post-secondary school other than a commercially operated school, unless the locality requires a greater distance. This distance must be measured in a straight line from the center of the nearest entrance of the place of worship or school to the nearest entrance of the licensee's premises. This subsection does not apply if the application is for license renewal and the licensed premises was established before the church, synagogue, or other place of worship or school or post-secondary school existed on the same street. And so basically, my understanding of what that means is that a dispensary can't be any closer than 500 feet to a church, etc., or a school. And so, given how narrow, you know, Redwatch is in a little valley, and we don't have a lot of room in the commercial districts. So, in the old document, there's some language about it should be set back a minimum of 300 feet from the boundary of a lot or parcel. And so our current ordinance doesn't work in line with the state licensing requirements. Another item is the measurement shall be made in a straight line without regard to intervening structures or objects from the nearest portion of the building or structure containing the marijuana dispensary to the nearest property line of the lot or parcel that is a church, school, public park, or sexually oriented business. Now, if we replace our language with the language that the state has, it will be a lot more clear. It will be a lot easier to understand and to discuss when people are applying. It will also provide a bigger buffer zone than the 300 feet that we currently have, and that would be for churches and schools. We currently have the language of a park in ours, but a park is not a requirement of the state. And so I am proposing, based on the state licensing information that the foreman's very kindly supplied, I would like to suggest that we substitute this language required by the license for the measuring and location parts of our existing ordinance. And so if anybody has any questions or comments at the table, we'll go, unless Teresa or Courtney have something to add.
No, I guess I can point out, so the reason why there's more lots available with this language is because we had 300 feet as a radius rather than now it's more of a straight line, and also the parks, taking out the parks. So we have a lot of parks throughout the C4, and so that also opened up lots with the 500 feet in straight line, only some churches and post-secondary schools. So
thank you. Teresa, did you have comments?
I was just going to say, with Pride Park sitting in the middle of Main Street, it makes a lot of sense to omit nobody would be allowed to have anything either end. So that makes sense.
Kelly?
I support that of lining it up with the state, Montana Code annotated. And I'm also wondering about, I don't see in their language anything about sexually oriented businesses.
Or other dispensaries.
Or other dispensaries, correct. So I'm curious about that.
We'll come back to that.
Okay. So for, so I feel like under the same premise that we're gonna strike public park, why would we strike sexually oriented business? I mean, we don't have any.
Yeah.
But.
If there's only.
Okay, and, it's just not in the language of the state licensing, so, correct. Do you have any more to add?
Nope.
Jen?
I think it's a good idea to use the state language. I also have the same question of where does that leave distance from other dispensaries or from,
Then the thing.
Okay.
Do you have
Standing
anything?
by. Nope.
My only concern is the reason why the county had to go in and change things is because the dispensary right across the high school found that loophole because it wasn't on the same street. And they were within 500 feet of the high school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really do have, and so the county did make theirs more restrictive so that you couldn't be within 500 feet of a school, period, whether it was on the same street or not. And if we use the state, that they're going to have that same loophole. Not that, you know, I don't want to, so.
Thank you very much. You know, I want to back up just a little bit. In reviewing this with the city attorney, I would venture to say that nobody wants a marijuana dispensary across from a school. And I think that is language that we could add that just says just like that, and that we will not have a dispensary across the street from a school. And I think it can be that clear and plain.
Okay.
And we'll continue to have discussion points. I appreciate that you mentioned that, because that's an important part of that. So I want to backtrack on the comments since that was added, Teresa.
Yes, absolutely.
Kelly,
Yeah, I think that's pretty.
do you have anything you'd like to add? Sarah?
No. Right.
Jody, if you
Yeah,
have more comments, please.
No, that would be my only concern is because I don't think the state realized the loophole they put in there when they did that, so.
Thank you. Pete,
500 feet, remove the parks.
thank you. Terry,
I support it as well.
thank you. Comments from the floor, Michael?
I would agree with you on that. You know, I can honestly look at you and tell you that the McGregors and the Keyses, we've been here 20-some years, we're not gonna put something across from the school. However, what happened in Roberts, he did find a loophole. He very quickly realized the error of his ways. He's no longer there. Unfortunately, the county has dealt with that. But I do think it's smart for you to put a provision in there to keep that from happening from, say, somebody else who might not have the same community-mindedness that the McGregors and we have. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Throw something in there for the schools.
I agree with that.
Thank you. Sandy?
I believe the reason we put parks in there, for the same reason there's schools in there, because there's kids in the park, there's kids in the school, so it's the same theory. So you've got Lions Park, where you've got kids playing all the time, so that's why we've got parks in there. And the pool is gonna be, you know, a city park, so that's why we have the parks in there, because that's where the kids are, same as with the school.
Skate park.
Yeah, the skate park. I know that we have a lot of parks, but that's where the kids are. And the kids are in school, so it seems to me to take out city parks is crazy, because you might as well take out schools. And the other reason why that loophole worked in Roberts is because it was door to door. And I believe the county, oh, he's not here, changed it to lot line to lot line. So that was another issue is that if they got it far enough away, the front door is here and the front door is there. So that's another loophole that I'm sure that the state's going to correct sooner or later. And we as a city can be more strict than the state. So we're not changing it as fast as they're changing it. But I do think that parks should stay because that's where the kids are.
Michael?
I would say, again, you know, when you look at a cannabis dispensary and the fact that we have nothing but a sign with our logo on it, and no one under the age of 21 is allowed in unless they have their medical card and they're with their legal guardian. Right now, children walk down the street of Redwatch and they see the Snow Creek and the Blue Ribbon and the snack, and they see the things that go on inside and outside of it. When they walk by a dispensary, they're going to see a closed door with a simple sign. Again, no one's allowed to consume cannabis on premises, so they're not going to see people consuming cannabis.
Thank you.
My thought on that.
Yes.
I really see your logic with the parks being equitable. Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, I see your logic.
Thank you. Gina?
I understand the park thing, but if we look at the park that's on 12th Street, and then we look at the church that's down on 16th, the community church, and then we look at the skate park, we now literally have about 400 feet of Red Lodge where one dispensary can be. So if we're going to put parks back in, I think that we need to look at the parks and be like, well, where can they actually go? Because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And like, I mean, I get it. I mean, I have a 6-year-old. I don't want him rolling up to a weed shop and being like, what's that? But at the same time, we have to allow for businesses to thrive and give them opportunities in numerous locations instead of a 400-foot area.
Thank you.
I think it opens up almost a bigger can of worms, because then you get the library. You know, I mean, I think it's just much more clear if you, with that other state language of the 500 feet for the, so otherwise I think there's people in store.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Michael?
I'd like to point one thing out very quickly, please, is that the Y stop again, that was a disaster, and there's a lot of reasons it happened, but the Y stop is addressed on Old Cooney Road, and the high school is addressed on a different road, and that was the loophole. It wasn't a door-to-door issue, it was the fact that they're both on different streets. And so, you know, again, if you can put a provision, maybe if you can say, yes, 500 feet on the same street, but again, at least minimum 500 feet from a school, then you've eliminated that issue.
Thank you, Michael. Any more comments from anybody else on the floor? Is there anyone online who'd like to comment? Anyone online? All right. I would like to ask at the table for anyone who would not agree with using the licensing language of 500 feet in addition to a provision that says it cannot be across the street from a school. Is there anyone who is against that provision?
I would rather it say 500 feet from a school, not across the street from a school, 500 feet from a school.
In any
direction.
Do you disagree with what I said?
I do if it's said that way, 500 feet or across the street from a school, because
So you disagree with what I said? I'm just trying to format it so that we know when we have to go back and when we don't.
I would be for what you said if it was 500 feet from a school.
But
period.
you're against.
The way you said
Okay.
it, yes. The way you said it, yes.
Is anyone else against it?
I am, if it is exactly as you said, across the street, I do not agree with that. If it was 500 feet, I would agree.
Okay.
I would agree with that also. I think it should say 500 feet from a school, just period, not street, not just in any direction, 500 feet from a school.
Okay, then we'll do it again. Is there any disagreement? It doesn't sound like there's any disagreement. It sounds like everybody's in agreement, which is crazy. But there's no disagreement that we'll adopt the licensing language with the addition that we will not have a dispensary across from a school in a 500-foot radius. Is that correct?
I think just omit the across the street thing, just 500 from a school.
In
any direction. Across, diagonal,
All right.
around the way, just
Nowhere, you know, whatever.
Okay.
And deleting parks.
Yeah.
Deleting
Or-
parks,
we're-
is that a separate thing?
We are just substituting the licensing language and adding and no dispensaries within 500 feet of a school. Did I miss anything? No. Okay. The next thing up is what Jen mentioned and what I think Kelly mentioned. Existing in our current ordinances, it says a marijuana dispensary allowing on-site consumption, which we don't have. I don't believe that was.
No.
They don't
even need them.
So, okay. But it does raise the question, it shall not be located within 300 feet from another marijuana dispensary that allows on-site consumption. The question is, do we want to have, as part of this zoning ordinance, that 2 marijuana dispensaries can't be within 300 feet of each other? Do we want to cross that all off? Do we want to include that? And we'll go around the table and on the floor and online, and then we'll figure out what we're going to informally vote on. Teresa?
I don't think it's necessary if we're already limiting the number. If you don't want to limit the number, I would put that back in or keep that, because that would ensure that they're at least stretched out, not sitting there lined up and down the street.
But we already voted on 2 at this point in
So
time.
I don't think they want to be next to each other.
All right.
Right, but
Kelly?
Could they be?
yeah, that's the thing, is that, yes, maybe the people here present don't want to be next to each other, but we don't know if that's universal. Would other potential businesses want to be next to each other? And I think this gets to the, some of the discussion that we've been having around how many do you really want in town? And I know some people, it's free market and, have how many ever is needed. But I guess for me, I would rather start small and have the ability to add later, as opposed to saying free market, however many, and then be kind of trapped in that.
So I'm not quite sure. Do you want to space them, or do you want that left up to the free market? Or what do you think about that?
Is there nothing in, I guess a question, is there anything in state code that talks about the dispensaries being location to another dispensary? Or is that not handled at all?
Not that I'm aware of.
I'm not aware of it.
Livingston has 2 next to each other, not in state law.
There you go. Thank you. Jen?
I think we can strike the whole separation from another dispensary from the current from the current zoning restrictions, because we've just approved one per 1,000, which is essentially two, I would say if this goes back to the planning board and they propose something different later on, that maybe revisiting that separation from another dispensary would be important to do.
Thank you.
I guess I just, can I ask Sandy and Al, when this was originally talked about and we did the 300 feet and it was medical, was it because we didn't have a limit on the number in town and we didn't want them all right next to each other, or?
It was the old language, and I guess we didn't recognize at the time that it was an on-site use. But to me, it's a little bit redundant. I mean, if you've limited it to two, they want to put two side by two.
I think the theory was a block is 300 feet, so that way they would be spread out a little bit more because we didn't limit the number at all. And I thought on-site consumption was against state law.
It is, so that'll come out.
Correct, so that has to come out. But I think 10 years ago when medical marijuana came in, we did that because a block is 300.
Right.
Thank you. I have no problem with taking out stuff.
Just taking it all out.
Just taking it out, yeah, since we are already limiting them.
Would you repeat the premise of the question, please?
The question is, in our existing zoning section, it says that a marijuana dispensary allowing on-site consumption shall not be located within 300 feet from another marijuana dispensary that allows on-site consumption. Now, taking out the on-site consumption, because that's not relevant, because it's not part of the question. Do we want to space the dispensary 300 feet from another dispensary? Or do we want to just take that out altogether? Or a third idea, but I don't know.
I do not concur with that because I do not agree with restricting commerce.
Thank you. Terry?
Yeah, I agree with Pete. Take it out.
Okay, any comment on the floor? Michael?
I guess I'd say, why are we worried about it? Dispensaries are next door to each other, we have bars next to each other. And again, if 100 people in Red Lodge are going to go into two dispensaries, what does it matter where they are? And again, I can honestly say, as much as I love James and Tressa, and we've been friends for a long time, I don't want to be right next door to each other unless it's the only option available.
Okay, any other comments on the floor?
Well, they are right next to each other.
I would just point out that you see car dealerships right next to each other. I mean, the idea is that somebody's going there for it and they're going to shop along. Whether, it can come out, it doesn't really matter. Because one will survive or there'll be this great signage going on, or something really different between the two.
Okay.
Or better. Yeah, exactly.
Gina?
It'd be interesting.
Yeah, no, and that's just retail space is really hard to come by right now. Businesses are leaving town because they can't find retail space, so I think limiting it is going to be, that's not going to be a good idea. And then also on the 500 feet thing from the schools, I just wanted to say you might want to do doorway to doorway and make that slightly more specific, or else we're going to find ourselves in a battle there probably. So the door to door, maybe incorporate that back into it.
Thank you. Any more comments on the floor? Yes.
I'm not fond of the door-to-door thing because you could arrange your doors differently. It's like the dispensary in Roberts was on a different street, but the door was way over here, and the door to the school, the main door was way over here. So it might have passed that 500-foot door-to-door deal.
But our blocks are only 300 feet, so it's still going to put it more than a block out.
And just so you know, so that everybody knows, we have, I know I have looked at a lot of the different language. That's why I just said across the street. But, I think if we have the language that we have and we find problems, then we can change it. But I think that gives us plenty of buffer zones. Michael and Jim, because I'm guessing you guys have looked at the maps very carefully, if if it's if 500 feet around the school, does that create a gray area? Do we need to define if it's to the center of to the property line or the door? Or, I mean, you know we only have 2 schools.
Right. I think for clarification's sake, some sort of delineation should be made, property line and property line. What was the one you mentioned, door?
Entrance
to
door,
dispensary,
you could make it,
closest property line, or something like that. I think it should be fine.
okay.
We actually have preschools too, not just schools.
By state,
So if you say schools, they usually include private schools and preschools.
the definition on licensing says that the schools that are referred to are not commercially operated, which to me would mean they're public, which would not include preschool.
Doesn't include nonprofits, like the Children's Center or the Boys and Girls Club, that would not be included in that.
They're nonprofit.
But they're not public if the public can't attend them. And Denison? Denison? Denison,
Everything we do in our zoning regulations is property.
you can answer this question when you, there you are. Denison, do you have a recollection about the business with preschools?
I don't. The school, what's defined in the requirements under the school is defined under Montana Code Annotated 20-5-402, and it defines school as a place or institute for the teaching of individuals, the curriculum of which is composed of the work of any combination of kindergarten through grade 12. And then it also includes a post-secondary school or preschool. And so preschool is specifically included in the definition of schools. And the school definition that would be incorporated if the city council incorporated the language from the statute would be pretty broad, meaning of schools. Just means a place or institute of teaching individuals with a curriculum.
Now,
I just wanted to point out that everything that we've done in our zoning policies references property line.
Mhm.
And I would hope that you would continue that with this, otherwise it'll be an exception if you go door to door.
Thank you.
Which door?
Thank you. Did you have, Mr. Holmes?
According to the Department of Revenue, their law says that place of worship, of course, and it says non-commercially operated school. Non-commercial. So like, I think nonprofit would be.
We want to be very cautious about charter schools and Montessori schools.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Michael?
I'd ask you to consider the door-to-door. Properties can be large. Property corners can be quite a ways away from a building. And if you're concerned about them seeing the building, then the property shouldn't be the issue. The building should be the issue. I can look at if the daycare center was included in school, it would be eliminated 2 blocks of downtown. And yes, the daycare will never see the entrance to that building, ever. Any more than they see the entrance to the bar, that's 300 feet from the daycare center.
So this is why I just wanted to say across the street, because if you think about the schools we have in town, we don't want any marijuana facilities across the street from a school. I think we're all in agreement on that. And the Regis Cafe is pretty much the only commercial business across the street from a school. Okay, but I think those are covered by the 500-foot straight line.
So what if we kind of got off the 500 number and did like 100 feet or 200 feet from schools? I know that we're trying to keep it consistent, but instead of being so distant, it might be better to look at like even 300 or something a little smaller.
Yes, everything is problematic.
Right.
However, we are only going to, we already did an informal vote that says we're adopting the standard set by the state that said it's 500 feet in one direction. There's only one caveat to that in Redwatch, and that's the Regis Cafe, because that's on the same street. That's on a different street, I think, than the school. So in theory, with a 500-foot line, you could still have a dispensary in that building and be in line with everything else. So that's why if we just make it across the street, we're clear on every school in Redwatch. Yes.
If you made it 500 feet from the property line, it'd still be illegal too. Even though it's across the street, it's 500 feet makes it. And when you say across the street from the school, does that mean across the street from the entrance of the school, or just across the street from the school in either direction?
The language we agreed on is within 500 feet of and on the same street. So that's why.
Is it and or?
And
on the state.
If it's 500 feet and or, then that would cover 500 feet from the back or the side or whatever.
Correct. But it adds a lot of other problems for a lot of other locations. So.
Welcome to our world.
You know what? My heart goes out to you. But anyway, the original thing we were talking about, does anybody remember what that was?
Separation from other.
Yeah, separation. It sounds like, it sounds, we agreed to remove okay.
Number 4.
Okay, so, and we adopted that. Oh, but the school thing. So do we want to say across the street? Yes.
I just want to point out the one thing that we on the planning board have to think in advance. It's not what it is now. This document stands for 5 years. So we always have to think ahead of it. It was just like if you don't like one thing here, there could be 6 of those in one block. So we have to think ahead. I know where the schools are now. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in 5 years if this town blows up with the 60 new houses and, 200 more kids. We don't know what's going to happen. Roosevelt used to be a school. I'm just more concerned with thinking ahead and the 500 feet from property line. It's not our job to say this is where it can be, especially if you open it up on the community entrances. You're thinking downtown only, but if you're going to open up community entrances, then there's no problem with the school issue. So 500 feet from the center of the property and the front door, schools have many doors. Which one is the real one? I know when I went to the grade school, I didn't know which door it was, except this one said go to that door. And then that door says, but so door to door is an issue, and I'm sure that the state's going to fix that at some point. And we're going to be constantly changing our zoning as the state changes theirs. So we need to do what's best for us.
Yes. Any more comment at the table?
I still want to leave it 500 feet to the school.
Okay. Well, let's go on to signs.
Can I?
Yes,
Oh,
no,
signs for
Courtney.
marijuana, sorry. I just want to put a little comment in, because I hear that, where there's discomfort of creating something and pushing it through and not letting planning board weigh in. So with all of this, I can take it and draft something, and then if we have time in 2 weeks, but it's hard because planning board is the day after city council, so it just extends the amount of time. But I do think even if planning board can agree on this is the stand-in, and then when we have the time, we will revisit and beef it up a little bit more and have those deeper conversations. So I can try to get drafted language to them for at least some discussion, and then with the hope that we'll revisit it in a few months.
I would like to finish this and get a verbal assent towards the document as a whole. And if between now and the next time we meet, the planning board has another, some sort of changes that they think would be beneficial, I'd be happy to look at those at that time.
Yeah, we won't.
But there's too many intervening issues that come up with both council and planning board that's gonna make it pushed off into the sunset, and we've gotta get it done.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely feel the urgent need to get it done.
And so right now, the proximity is gonna be what's contained in the licensing criteria. And that's, we'll do a consensus at the table for what we're gonna get the assent on. The options are across the street, a 300-foot radius from a school, or a 500-foot radius from a school. So, or option 4, in which case we'll go around again, Teresa.
I'd like to see 500 feet from the property and or across the street prohibited.
Okay.
From
Kelly, can you say that again?
500 feet from a school, right, and the planning board, what I'm hearing is from the property line. Is that right? For school only, right? And or across the street prohibited. So those two conditions around the school.
Do you have, Jen, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I don't feel prepared to have an opinion on either two of those options, so.
Okay, Jody?
I agree, 500 feet from the school.
Pete?
A no comment.
Terry?
Do across the street.
Okay, well, we will start with 500 feet. Is anybody in disagreement with a 500-foot radius around the school property? Terry?
No, I'm fine with that.
Is there any other dissent to that? So we'll move it forward with a 500-foot radius from the perimeter of the school property.
School is defined by state code for marijuana. Right, because
The school
Mike pointed
defined
out that
by
it's a little bit different
20-5-402.
in their code.
Okay. All right, the next thing is signs. It currently reads, hey. It currently reads, in addition to the standards of Article 4.6.0 outdoor advertising, signs visible from the exterior of the structure may state that there is marijuana inside. I don't know how this is going to go, but the suggested change is that it would say, all signage must comply with the standards of Article 4.6.0 outdoor advertising and is subject to any state laws and regulations in anticipation that those are going to change. So does anybody at the table want to say anything about that?
I'm just checking that our sections for outdoor signage haven't changed, it's pointing to our zoning regulations.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure that that's right now.
4.6 is up for advertising.
Yeah.
Does anybody on the floor have any comments on that? Does anyone online have any comments on that? Teresa, did you find the answer to that? If that's still the
Courtney
ballot?
says it's still current.
Oh, it is,
so that's
okay. So does anyone have any objection to that language for signage?
We have pretty strict sign codes already, so following state law, it's fine. And, you know, as well as ours, so.
All right, then on that item, Teresa, is there anything that you can see that we Miss?
I'm sorry, no.
On the whole?
On the whole,
Yeah.
I still have that one open question is that, and this is something I think that, Dennison, the attorney would have to answer. Is it, do we need to change this section for special uses to read marijuana businesses?
Which item is that?
Just the title of it, and we talk about marijuana dispensaries only, but we have to allow for all types of businesses according to what we've just heard.
Dennison? Dennison, you're muted. Thank you, there you go. So Dennison, the question, did you hear it?
I did.
Can you answer?
I can give you a good shot in the dark on this one. I can't give you a specific answer without doing more research. So I'll let you know. Did you want me to give you a shot in the dark, or do you want me to do more research and give you an exact answer? It's up to you guys.
Well, I'll tell you what I think, and then you can tell me what you think. I think we can just limit this zoning document to refer to marijuana dispensaries, and then we can leave other kinds of marijuana businesses out of it until it can go through the planning and zoning board to create whatever animal they want to create out of the rest of it. What do you think?
That sounds good. Mayor, members of the City Council, I can tell you that based on my research, the local governments definitely have obviously the authority to regulate different types of businesses and marijuana type businesses within the city limits. The type of businesses that are allowed to be regulated are usually listed there, but they don't have the specific criteria of which ones you can just not allow completely. And so I would want to do more research before giving a specific answer.
Dennison, can we move forward as only dealing with marijuana dispensaries until further advisement?
I see no reason why we can't move forward with what we have. And then obviously throughout the process, the planning board and the city council can add additional marijuana businesses as additional facts develop.
Thank you very much, Dennison. All right, I think that wraps up our marijuana discussion. Hopefully lighting will be a little easier. I don't think there's anything that we can cover. All right. So Courtney, would you like to tell us about the lighting ordinance changes?
Absolutely. So the lighting changes were kind of sparked by, I mean, I had questions when we were reviewing anyways, but when I was made aware that we were trying to pursue being a dark sky community, the potentially first in Montana, part of that is beefing up your lighting ordinance. And so, you know, once I looked at a model lighting ordinance for the suggested way that cities should do it, I realized there were a lot of issues. So a group of people got together to work on it and to address the concern about, you know, not allowing enough lighting in the city. That's not what the lighting ordinance does. It's just to say that any new lighting, we want to prevent light trespass. So we don't want lights that shine directly into people's bedroom windows. And we also don't want, you know, any glare or anything that where the light goes above a horizontal plane, so where it escapes into the sky. So there can be lighting, but it needs to be shielded so that it's directed downward. There can be lighting, but there is a lot of engineering studies out there that show like that some lighting is too much for human health, for reducing wildlife migrations at night, and so there is kind of like a happy medium. So the lighting ordinance is to bring more guidance to homeowners, future developers, on how they can improve the lighting in their homes and not necessarily that we would be removing. Redwatch is doing, we are pretty well with our lighting as is because our previous zoning already requires that they be fully shielded. We tried to address light trespass, but there was a lot of language that was out of date, that wasn't up to current standards in the lighting industry. So we just tried to be, I'd say we tried to be clearer. It is a pretty beefy change, but I think it'll help give more guidance to me when I'm looking at any lighting plans that developers come to, or if people have questions on how they can improve their lighting in their own property.
I just looked at the regulations that Ketchum, Idaho had. I haven't seen your regulations, but according to the regulations that Ketchum, Idaho had, I would have to remove lighting. And my neighbor across the street from me would have to remove lighting as well. Because it depends on how high your lights are, and there's a whole angle. You can't, if your light is too high, then there's no way that you can't light trespass. Even if you have a guard over top of it. I just looked at the Ketchum, Idaho. It's pretty.
So, excuse me, if we could have Courtney speak.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And finish, and then we'll have Teresa speak, and you'll have an opportunity. But let's finish hearing about it before we want to talk about it. So, Courtney, do you have more to add, or are you finished?
No, I'm finished.
Okay, thank you. Teresa?
Yeah, I was actually approached by someone else that wanted to look into dark skies for Redwatch. And so it's true that that's how this started. So we started looking at the ordinances that we had, which were grossly outdated. They don't talk in terms of, what we buy at the store today, right? They don't even, they have several lamps were allowed as standards, which we don't necessarily want to have. We want to drive towards LEDs. We want to drive for lights that are warmer in temperature, are not the bright whites and blues that make everybody sick or disturb sleep patterns or whatnot. This is about smart lighting, not eliminating lighting, right? So when's the last time you went outside and shined a flashlight up to see a bear? I mean, this is supposed to be making lighting safer and improving security, not eliminating lighting. This is to make lighting on the ground smart and eliminating it or conserving the dark sky that we have. So there is no cost to the city other than developers and coming into planning board and running through their light plans as they're developing and making sure that they're presenting a lighting plan that is compliant with dark skies or our own lighting standards, our lighting regulations. So those are the points that I wanted to make. It's not about reducing light on the ground where it is needed for our security and our health. It's about being smarter and saving money as well, conserving our energy. There are a lot of good reasons to go ahead with an updated lighting ordinance.
Okay, we have 12 minutes left, and this is going to be the last item that we cover. And so I want to hear from you if you have comments. Or is there any comments that anybody wants to make at the table?
Yes.
Pete?
I think this is an unnecessary additional level of government attempting to try to control people's personal lives, and I'm not in favor of it.
Thank you. Terry?
I just had a question if there were, I don't know that much about it, any studies on how police departments react to this, or have they been supportive, or I don't know if the chief has weighed in on this or had any ideas?
Any comments from the floor?
I have a comment online if no one else is there.
Okay, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm Jeremy from Hagen Avenue. I just wanted to support the lighting changes in general. And I also wanted to plug the fact that we're going to have a table at Earth Day at Lions Park, April 30th. You know, we're going to have some materials there. People who do have very specific concerns might be able to get some answers, you know, through that avenue as well. And I did just want to maybe emphasize the idea that, you know, it is dark skies, not dark streets. And, you know, the sky is a commons, right? You know, we all share that. It's something we all have to protect. And it's not a trespass on individual liberty. I would push back on that slightly. So that's the only comment I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any other comments online?
Kristen, can I make one comment?
Yes.
I realize that it's dark skies and not dark streets, but my only concern is, honestly, is we do have very, very dark streets, and this is a whole nother problem. We have so many people that walk their dogs in the street because we do not have sidewalks, and it's very hard to see them. And so I guess I am looking at trying to be careful with this, because we do have grizzly bears in town now, and we have black bears, and we have mountain lions. And the darker it is, to me, the scarier it is to walk home with those type of things happening. So, and I realize it's probably a totally separate issue,
Well,
but it's just, you know.
All these are very good. I think everybody has a point that's a good one here. You know, starting with Pete's, because it's bigger than the light. Because, you know, we don't want more laws than we need. We want to allow people to have as much freedom to pick their wallpaper and their street lights, and you know, we don't want to intervene with what people do in their yards. But another thing is that, you know, as so many people know, there are so many communities where you really can't even see the stars as much as because and it's not because of the lights that shine down, it's because of the lights that shine up. And so and I don't want to hurry people along because you know, these are big decisions that affect a lot of people. And so I will just say that, and I have one more thing to say about the marijuana, but we had a very good discussion about the marijuana. We heard a lot of good thoughts, and we have a lot of things that we can look at in the future to make it better for whatever deficiencies we have. But the same is true with this light ordinance. If you're comfortable, I mean, I've read it because I did, but I mean, I know everybody's busy, and it's a hairy document to get through. So if you want, you can indicate your dissent for it now, if you're comfortable. And if you would like to come back to it, and we can pick it up and have further discussion about exactly what the intent is at the next meeting, then we can do that too. So what do you prefer? Teresa?
What do I prefer? For everybody would be happy with it. But I just wanted to comment on, again, the point that it's an intrusion on a personal, you know, right. I can walk into my backyard today, and I've got a light shining in my face, which prevents me from seeing potentially a grizzly bear that's behind that over there, right? So all we're trying to do is say, shine the light down and spread it out over the ground so that somebody that walks out can actually see, and it's not shining in their face or up into the sky. We're just trying to make sense of the lighting that we are using and presenting it in a better way. We're not telling anybody to get rid of their lights, but through time, yes, if you're going to change your lights out in your house, please put in something that makes more sense. And when developers come to the city, we're telling them the same thing. Hey, if you're going to put in all new lighting, put in something that makes sense.
And there's the safety aspect too. A lot of the studies that I have read show that this is actually safer than what people do, because we get a lot of glare, and it prevents you from being able to see into the dark or see clearly. And so smarter lighting actually makes it safer.
And so the original question is, as a council, would you like to pick up with this next time? Or do you have your mind made up of if you're in favor of this lighting ordinance? I mean, we can come back to it, or we can note our dissent now. So it sounds like does anybody want more information? Jody?
No, it won't really matter, I guess, one way or the other, because we still have dark places in town that are really hard to see on the streets. And it's not because of this going into effect or anything, it's just there's no streetlights there. So,
Would you, okay,
so I don't have a problem with this.
is
no.
everybody prepared to let me know if they do not agree with this, pushing us forward?
I do not agree with it.
Okay, does anyone else not agree with it? Then we'll push that one through. And we'll start on the next one. Next time, I wanted to make one clarification. Oh, we do. Oh, we've got more to do. What are the rules on these resolutions? Can we push them?
We have to move forward.
Okay.
They're on there for action.
Okay, use of city-owned land permit for the Shakespeare in the Park event. So, Teresa, did you?
Yes, I'm ready to speak to that. We have an application from the foundation, Redwatch Area Community Foundation, to use the southernmost portion of Lions Park, including the gazebo, on August 3rd, from, what was it, roughly 5 o'clock?
Setting up around noon.
Setting up around noon. The letters of, approval from the departments were asked for. Did we receive everything? I don't know if I've seen everything in.
I think, yeah, everybody.
Okay. They are asking for a waiver of the fee for in-kind services, basically cleaning up afterward and bringing in extra garbage cans as needed. They are also asking for an exception on or a waiver on the open container law, so that people could bring in their own alcohol. Could that get
My
changed?
understanding that it's a park, and so
I asked Greg about that. It's a park. So it's already okay.
There is no.
All right,
Yeah.
so we don't need that waiver, we're good. But anyway, that was the request, and I didn't see any other issues with it. They asked all the neighbors, they have the map included. This is a great event for the community. If they are selling any goods though, they would pay, oh yeah, sorry, thank you. The insurance document has been received, and we're covered for liability, city's covered for liability in that. You weren't certain, I'm sorry, I keep looking over here at Kat. Kat Healy submitted it on behalf of the foundation. I don't know that we understand whether or not they're gonna sell memorabilia.
Last year they didn't due to COVID, and they're still, they haven't made a decision yet.
And if they do, will they pay the resort taxes through you to the city? Or are they?
My understanding that if they sell, they would be paying. We don't have any.
Okay, so we may have to ask them about the resort taxes if they sell anything.
All right, thank you. Any comment at the table? Any questions? Any questions or comments on the floor? Any questions or, oh, yes, Gina?
Okay. No, not for this.
Okay.
Just want to say one quick thing.
Okay. Any comments online? May I have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the use of city-owned land permit for Shakespeare. Oh, no.
Yeah.
We can.
We can?
We can. Oh, no, we can. We're at our new meeting format. I'm sorry. I have to go through this twice. I move to approve the use of city-owned land permit for Shakespeare in the Park on August 3rd, 2022, and has been applied by Redwatch Area Community Foundation.
Second.
All right. Any further comments? Roll call?
Saddles?
Yes.
Fratelli?
I say it, yes.
Durbin?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Running. Yes.
Yes, yes.
All right, next on the agenda is Resolution 3596 for the appropriation of the CDBG non-provisional funds for the construction of affordable housing in partnership with the Red Lodge Area Community Foundation. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is part of the ongoing process for the CDBG money. And so we need, that's what this document is for, is to appropriate those funds and direct the city clerk to allocate the money to the Red Lodge Area Community Foundation. Is that correct?
Yeah, and Robin's on if you guys want her to speak to these two resolutions that are on here, 3596 and 3597. They're just kind of what's needed for them to move forward with their whole grant.
It's my understanding that everybody's familiar with this, but if anybody needs any further explanation from Robin, we can sure have her speak to it. Anybody? Okay, any comments from the floor? Any comments online? Could I have a motion to approve Resolution 3596?
I move to approve Resolution 3596, the Budget Authority Resolution for the CDBG Fund.
Okay.
All right, any further comments? Roll call?
Battles?
Yes.
Fratelli?
Yes.
Durbin?
Yes.
Keaton?
Yes.
Ronnie?
Yes.
Whistler?
Yes.
All right, Resolution 3597 is a resolution for designating an environmental certifying official for the city of Red Lodge. This was an item that was required for some of the funds for the CDBG grant. The city of Red Lodge doesn't have an environmentally certifying official, and so this would designate that would be
Our engineers,
our engineer.
whoever our engineers may be, that would be who would stand.
So, does anybody have any questions or comments for that? We have Robin, if anybody needs further information, or is everybody comfortable with it?
Yes.
May I have a motion?
I move to approve Resolution 3597 to designate an environmental certifying official for the city of Red Lodge.
Second.
Okay, any further comment? Roll call?
Battles?
Yes.
Fratelli?
Yes.
Durbin?
Yes.
Keaton?
Yes.
Ronnie? Yes. Whistler?
Yes.
Thank you. Resolution 3598, we're almost done. The Resolution 3598 is to amend the function and purpose of the Red Lodge Pool Committee. The pool is work in progress. We originally had a pool fundraising committee. We're moving into actually having a pool now, and everybody is eager to make it the very best that we can make it. And so we have the original pool committee that was doing a lot of fundraising and planning, and they are interested in being a resource for the city to provide, ideas and what we can do better, and be like one more voice of, one. It's very difficult to see what's going on when you're the person who's operating all the time. And so Jim has been very helpful with his insight and his experience. And I think that having the pool committee continue will complement the work that he does with the pool. So does anybody have any questions about that at the table? Teresa?
Interested in understanding why, other than to accommodate the existing committee, the number of members outside the city should number 3.
I believe the reason, and I'll speak to this, is that the pool is going to be attracting a lot of people in the county, probably. Al?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are a little bit arbitrary, but there was, in the history, there was about 35% of the people were outside the city limits that used the pool. And also it allowed us to expand the pool committee a little bit to bring in some people who had operational experience. The core of our pool committee right now are fundraising and planning. And so 4 of those current members were going to carry over, and we were going to recruit 3 more people.
So you have 7 total.
There'll be a 7 total
One will
plus,
be the account.
and we will report to Jim. And we would have a member of the council or planning board that would serve on the committee, make it 8. And also the pool manager would also attend meetings as whenever possible to make it up to 9.
You know, and I'd also like to say, you know, we haven't had a pool committee before. Jim has handled the whole thing. We don't know what kind of things are changing. There's a lot of inflation right now. There's a lot of people have, you know, there's all sorts of elements here. But we have a short pool season, and so we want to get the most out of it. But we expect, like the agenda and like the zoning documents, we expect things to change in this department. You know, we'll see how it goes, and we plan on amending it accordingly. So, any more questions?
Mayor?
Yes.
Just to be clear, this committee has no authority. They're just an idea recommendation group. The authority lies with Public Works and the council.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any more questions? Yes.
I'm concerned about the chain of command, and I believe that was just answered. There shouldn't be 5 chefs in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And we've worked real hard, Jim and me and Al have worked real hard to ensure that we have a clear chain of command. That's also collaborative. So, and that's one of the things we are all going to keep our ears open for, so that we can amend it for the next pool season. So, if I could have a motion.
A motion to approve resolution 3598.
Oh, thank you.
To amend the function and purpose of the Redwatch Pool Committee. Second.
Okay, any further comments? May I have a roll call?
Adams?
Yes.
Fratelli?
Yes.
Urban?
Yes.
Keaton?
Yes.
Ronnie?
Yes.
Whistler?
Yes.
All right. I don't know what working council items are. I think we just did all the work. Correspondence, we had some letters, but they didn't come in soon enough to get into the documents for the meeting. But it was like 5-1, 5 for the marijuana, 1 against. There was some against there was 1 against the lighting, probably 3 in favor of the lighting.
They'll be in the packet.
And they will be in the packets in the next meeting in 2 weeks.
I think working council items was to give any council people an opportunity to give any updates on things they've been working on, or if anything they wanted to share with the group.
Does anybody have anything? We kind of did that.
I'll be prepared for that next time.
Oh,
Let me just make one more comment
yes,
about
Terry wanted to
the
say.
chats with council.
Mm-hmm.
So I made some copies of these flyers. It's a little late since this is going to happen tomorrow. But what we're going to do is give people an opportunity. We're going to have city council people at Cat Hill Bakery tomorrow morning from 9 to 10:30. You can drop by and talk to one of us. It'll be Pete and I tomorrow. And then again at 5 to 6:30, we'll be available at the Pollard Hotel fireplace area. So we're going to try to do that after each of the full council meetings, so once a month, and start out and get it publicized here. And we'll do it as long as there's interest from the public. So I hope people stop by and see us.
And then, you know, we've had a very good conversation tonight. So I know, Gina, you had one more thing you'd like to say.
Yeah, sorry, it's gonna backtrack and be really annoying, but I was just doing some math. And if you do the 500 feet from a preschool and a church, you're limiting the businesses from the Pollard Ox Pasture to the Snow Creek, which is just a little bit over 2 blocks, which is why I suggest you look at the 300 feet or something a little bit different. Very limiting.
Well, yeah, the devil's in the details. And it's also in I don't want any of you to have a sleepless night over this. If I can tell you. Oh. The actual, the part that we're replacing says that, that the preschools would not be, it's my understanding that the preschools would not be included in that because they are not, this says, is it within 500 feet of and on the same street as a building used exclusively as a church or as a school or post-secondary school other than a commercially operated school. So I can get clarification from Dennison from that, but a commercially operated school to me is for money. And so the only schools that we have that are public is the high school, the grade school, and the middle school. So but I'll clarify that.
I didn't know I was an advocate
No,
of this, and so I was saying.
No, you know what?
I'm sorry.
That's something I wanted to come back to, because I want everybody to understand what the rules were, because if we redo them, we need to understand what we did. So I will ensure that with Dennison that I'm reading it correctly, and if we need to go back over it again, we will, because like everybody said, we want to get it right the first time. Yes?
Are there any public preschools?
No.
No. There's a nonprofit preschool.
They're private.
Well, I mean,
they-
it doesn't exist as a public preschool.
Well, I better find the right
understand.
definition though,
Yeah,
just to cover your base.
Yeah.
for that.
Non-commercial schools, which would be nonprofit schools.
And the hospital may be nonprofit.
Well, if we don't know, we better find
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
So,
Interesting.
okay, last comment.
Comment, and I'll make it very quick. And again, I've beaten this dead horse many times. I understand the stigma with cannabis. And I know that you have to make rules thinking of the future and who may come in trying to put in a dispensary. But I can also appreciate what you brought up earlier. People can have health issues with cannabis. A lot of times that's related to edibles. Edibles can be extremely strong and people don't realize it. I can tell you right now, the 2 dispensaries you have, we educate people on that. We don't let them just fly out the door eating 500 milligrams of cannabis. That's
All right,
we
thank
say.
you. All right. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second. All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you all for coming and participating. Thanks, Val.